Voices from the Mausoleum is brought to you by the You Run Podcast Network and yourunpodcast.com.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome to an episode of Remakes and Continuations with my co-host, Scott Harding from the You Run Podcast.
Hello. I'm looking forward to this episode.
I am also. I think this should be a good one, I think. I went simple with the background, but I like it. So, and we've been like, so if you're not familiar, we record in lumps of episodes because we have such a huge time difference between us. And every time we record, we say it feels like it's forever, but it really does feel like forever.
Yeah, it feels like a long time this time, but we've both had lots going on in our lives, and like it's been hard to pin down a recording date this time.
Yeah, but it's good that we do them in advance the way we do, because then it gives us more time to figure it out if there's like bumps or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're not familiar, it's a show where Scott and I talk about horror movie remakes, more recently, and continuation, so we can talk about whatever we want.
Yeah, but bend the rules, make them work for us, and just do what we like, really.
Yeah, it's our show. We try if we want to. And I'm sure the background has given it away. I'm actually kind of surprised this wasn't one of the first ones we did. But today we'll be talking about the 2003 horror movie remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Probably one of the most highly regarded remakes, I think. I feel like this is generally... people love this movie. I don't know that a lot of people really hate it.
No, this is a movie that when people start complaining that they hate remakes and all we get is remakes, this is a remake I bring up and it normally shuts people up.
Yeah, rightfully so. This is a solid one.
Yeah, I think so. As remakes go, this is good. I am not a massive fan of this franchise as a whole. I think the original movie is iconic. It done things that will never be replicated, that can't be replicated, like the lack of having a musical score, and all of the jump scares in that are genuinely terrifying because there's no
no hint, no build up to something. It just happens.
Yeah, like the first one where Leatherface pops out of the door and smashes him on the head.
Oh,
like that. I remember the first time I watched it, my jaw was on the floor, and I was like, my heart was racing. Like, wow! And no movie's going to recapture that. And this remake didn't recapture any of the magic of the original.
No.
But it told the story in a new way for a new audience that fitted the time period better than the original did.
Yeah, I also think so. One of the big things that always comes up when we talk about like the original Texas Chainsaw is that you go away from it feeling like you saw a lot of depravity, but you didn't. Like, you really don't see the things it convinced you that you did see, which I think is another thing, like what you were saying, that I don't think can be replicated, because it's just done so well as far as like when you're looking at all of the things in the background and you're paying attention, especially the dinner table scene in particular. But you walk away thinking you saw all these heinous things and you didn't. Whereas I feel like in the remake, they tried to give you more of that visually than the psychological, making you feel like you saw something you didn't. I think is something else this one did really good. Like you felt the depravity in the original, you see it in this one, I think is kind of like the bigger difference between the two.
Yeah, see, I think there's an argument to be had that the remake is better than the original.
I'm inclined to agree.
I don't know if it is, and I think it's the first remake that it's a very different movie.
It is. No, it is. I think, and it's also the first remake I think I ever saw, because I technically saw this before I ever saw the original, because I didn't start going back to more classic horror like this, like the icons, right? Until I was probably in my mid-20s. So really? Yeah, I was very like modern mainstream horror, or I should say not modern, more present day So like when I was growing up in the 90s, that was my horror. I didn't go back to the older, with the exception of, and I'm sure you know this, the Universal monsters and stuff like that, because my dad introduced me to those when I was growing up, because it's very kid friendly horror. It's not very, but a lot of this stuff like this, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween movies, those were all things that I got into later in life.
Yeah.
I just watched the big popular stuff that was happening right now. Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, that was just kind of the thing. So it is a little bit of a different experience, unfortunately, seeing a remake before you see the original. But I think that the original, as a first watch, it doesn't really matter if you've seen the remake or not. It still feels, I think, the same as it would regardless. But yeah, this was the first remake I think I was ever introduced to in the horror world, and it's a favorite. I think I even owned this one, which really says something, because I'm not super into physical media. That's probably going to have to change with the way things are going, but I'm not super into physical media. But I own this. I actually have this on DVD, and it's one that I revisit, at least once a year, probably.
Yeah, I think this is going to get some hate in the comments, I'm sure. I think this movie.
Not you, not Scott Hardy.
Would I say anything that upsets people? Like, do you know that there's times when I do things like I post a TikTok or I post a reel, and I say something that I truly believe, and I genuinely don't think it's going to upset anyone,
and then
yeah, I done a reel the other day that mentioned the word millennial, and it just got swamped by hundreds and hundreds of Gen Xers going, well, this applies to us as well. Like, I never said it didn't. Like, I just
right.
said it appealed to me. Like, as a millennial, this was what I grew up with. Yes, but it's ours. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. You can't claim it. Like, fuck. And then I just dig myself into a bigger hole in the comments going, well, this belongs to us. And I'm in the comments going, who says this belongs to you? Why is it yours?
Where's your proof?
Yeah, explain it. Show me the receipt that gave you this.
People love when you use the word receipt.
Yeah, I'm gonna say something that I think is controversial. This movie is carried by the cop and by Jessica Biel. The rest of the movie around it, couldn't give a toss about. I couldn't give a toss about Leatherface in this. He is not the main character. The cop is. The cop is the main
cop
baddie.
is scarier.
Yeah. It's James someone. I can't think of his name. James
He's
Elway.
so good at shit like this too, because he plays this well. Because what's the other? He was also in what's the other really big one that he did that was like this? Was he in a Rob Zombie movie?
I think he was. I can't think which one though.
Shit. But either way, he plays these roles very well. No, he's terrifying. I think that Leatherface, even though, story-wise is a human, right? There is this level of monster to him that makes him feel slightly less real, whereas the sheriff is just a human being.
Yeah.
And he says some shit, especially about the girl that blows her brains out in the van.
Oh, that scene.
Oh my God.
That scene comes so out of left field. I didn't see it coming. I'm sat there quite comfortable. Bang. Oh my God.
It does. But like the stuff he says when they meet him and he's looking at the body and he says, she's so wet down here. What were you guys doing? And you're just like, she just blew her brains out in our van. Can you not?
Yeah, he's a really, really bad dude, and he plays it so well. And Jessica Biel in this, just wow on every level, from the most attractive woman in a horror movie ever, through to fabulous performance, through to fabulous final girl. Like, everything about her in this movie is perfection.
This is her strongest acting performance I've ever seen her. Like, I'm not a super big Jessica Biel fan, and I like, just in general, like, I just don't think she's like a super strong actress. And I still don't think that she is, but I think she really brought her A game with this, because there's like, those scenes, like as the movie goes on later and she's got like, she just looks like she's like falling apart. Like her eyes look like they're sagging. They've got her skin, her lips are muted and kind of crusted over, and she's like shaking and like, I don't know, like she just really, really showed what she's capable of doing in this film in a way that I don't think she has in anything else I've ever seen her in. So she definitely is. I also have a soft spot for her fiance because like the first thing I ever saw him in was Buffy. It's amazing how often I bring up that show, isn't it? But
that's one word for it. Yeah, amazing. We'll go with amazing.
Does it just get on your nerves?
Sometimes.
Stop it. This is who I am, okay? But no, like I got introduced to him in that. I also really liked him, and there was a show called, I think it was called New Haven. He was in that, and I really like him, but he is, like you said, like all the other characters are very background compared to these two. The only other one I think I felt like did like really, when she was on camera, did it up is the mama, the one with the glasses in the meat shop. She was like, when they come into the meat shop and they're telling her like what's going on, they need to call the police or whatever, her disconnection from human experience was so heavy. Like you just feel it, you know? And so when she's on camera, I think she did a really great job. She's just not in that many scenes, right? She's not like a focal point, but I agree. The sheriff and Jessica Biel, that's where it's at for sure.
Yeah, and I think because of the way they focus this movie, it is very mirroring of the original. Obviously, in the original, it's more focused on Leatherface and not the sheriff. But I think with the focus on Jessica Biel in this and the focus on Sally Hardesty in the original, that is very much mirrored. I put these two in the same category as how they're portrayed. They're portrayed as very similar characters. They're both fairly confident. Lots of people say Sally Hardesty's quite a timid character, but she's really not.
Like, I don't think she's timid.
No, I think they're both very confident women, and I think that plays into the story quite well because they're very confident up until a point where you see in both movies they have a oh shit. They have that moment where they go, I'm in too deep. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I have no time to react. And I think that's a really good way to play. If you've got a really confident character in a horror movie, you have to shatter their confidence. You have to make them want to get it back. And both of those characters go through that arc of, I'm really cool. I'm hip. I'm going to get killed. I got to
regroup here. Yeah. There's something very humanizing to that experience because it's not an overconfident, like they don't play asshole characters. It's just they're used to being in normal situations. And so when you put someone who's normally like, I can handle whatever in a situation where they can't handle it, there has to be a change, or you as the viewer are no longer going to connect to them as a character. If it's too over the top, if it doesn't feel logical, if the transition from one to the other, which we talked about in when we talked about 2013 with Mia, or not Mia, the Rise. I'm sorry. When we were talking about Evil Dead Rise, you're talking about the transition from one type of character to another. That's what happens in these films, is there has to be a changeover because you can't just be who you were and survive this. You have to become something more.
I've got a real soft spot for the old man who lives in the house. He amuses me.
The guy in the wheelchair. Yeah, in the wheelchair.
Yeah. What the fuck are you doing in my house? I'm going to kill you, boy. And the bloke's looking at him like rippling muscles, looking at this old man in the wheelchair like, are you sure?
You think so? Like, you think that's... Oh, and then when she's like trying to help him and he's like putting his hand up her butt and like trying to like, and he's like making the faces. Yeah, that played really well too.
Like, he's a terrible guy, but you kind of just...
comical. You're right.
You just chuckle. You're like, you're just an old pervy man in a wheelchair. You kind of get a pass. You're being horrible, but you've made me smile.
Not as bad as the sheriff.
No. No one's as bad as the sheriff. And I think in this, they do a good job of telling a very similar story without just copying it.
Right. No, I would agree. Well, and I was going to say too, you know, when you're thinking like there's certain scenes in this that you can do stills of next to each other. So there's like that first scene in particular where they go up to the house, like that one shot where they're walking up to the house.
Yeah.
I think like those you can do side by side. The end scenes with the getting in the truck, like there's certain things that are very, and we talk about this all the time with remakes. It's got the nostalgia points, but then it does its own thing too. So you've got moments like that where you're like, oh yes, I loved this scene in the original, or you're able to picture the original in your head, but then it also will do something unique and on its own. And that makes it, to me, a really, really strong version of a remake.
Yeah, we do say all the time, for a remake to be good and stand on its own 2 feet, it needs to take enough of the original source
Yes.
material, but it
Yep.
also needs to bring in its own take and its own way of portraying that to the audience. This does that better than most, which I think is why it's highly regarded. Like, the way that the characters respond is not just sheer terror like it is in the original. There is an element of thinking and planning and how am I going to do this? And we see it, like there are scenes where you get like a flash shot of someone's face, like when the old guy in the wheelchair challenges the young guy. It goes straight to his face, and you see him process what he's just said, and he kind of like raises an eyebrow and has almost like a second's pause to say, did he just threaten me? What do I do? There's an old man in a wheelchair that just threatened me. Do I beat him up, or does that make me a bad person? But you see all of those emotions in like a couple of seconds on his face.
Yeah.
Like, you see him process it, and you see that so much in this movie and with the cop. So when the cop gets to that scene, he has a moment where he looks over all of them and his mind is going. He's like, what do I do? Do I take them? Do I feed them basically to my family, or do I let these kids go? Because I think if they played it different, he'd let them drive away.
Yeah, because you're right. There is that moment of decision where, because the girl, obviously, the girl that they find walking escaped. Like she got away from them, and that's why it's like this weird situation of like, would they have just been able to just drive through this? If there was ever another reason to not pick up hitchhikers, right? Like she was like clearly not in her mind. And I think being a female, which was a smart call, it made it easier to want to stop and help her. Whereas if you see like a strange man on the side of the road, I feel like most cases you're like, not worth it. But she was a small female. She felt very, like there was no way she could be a threat. And so they stopped to help her, versus maybe they would have just driven through the town and nothing bad would have ever happened, to your point. But it's like the perfect setup for leading up to like everything else that happens in the film. I really like this one. I also think in general, like the side character family members and stuff, like when we get to the trailer with the 2 women and the baby, you're just like, what the fuck? Like, these people are nuts. And like she drinks you're like, why? At what point did you think that was logical, right? Because then that whole but then that they've got the baby, and I don't know, like that whole thing is just like, it's so unsettling.
I would argue there's an element of The Hills Have Eyes to this.
1,000% I would agree with
that. They took that dynamic you get in the town in The Hills Have Eyes, and they kind of brought it back a little bit more into reality and implemented it on this family. There's a big amount of work been done to give the family more plot and narrative and more understanding of what's going on, where in the original it's just there's a family, they're creepy, we don't get much beyond that.
Because this, like, to your point, this adds where like each one has their little part or whatever, whereas the other one felt more of like a group thing than like individual pieces. Because you've got the 2 in the trailer that are taking care of the baby that they took, and then you've got the sheriff, you've got the mom in the meat shop. You've got like so like exactly like what you're saying, they've all got more I guess purpose. I don't know, like if that's the best way to put it, but I agree. And I think that makes them, I think the family in the original is unsettling, but I think they feel unsettling because we're kind of presented like you should be unsettled by them. Whereas you naturally meet these people, you're like, nope.
And genuinely, like the sheriff's in a position of power, and they go to him for help, and then for him to be how he is, like I'd be like, as soon as he's gone, I'm getting in that truck and I am out of here. Like I wouldn't be messing around. And I would say the hitchhiker from the original is better. I love the hitchhiker.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you like head cheese? My brother makes a really good head cheese.
You know, it was supposed to be called that. What was that? That was one of my quiz things for Mark, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He had no idea.
No, I thought
horribly.
he did lose horribly. I think his character is, for me in the original, more pivotal than anyone else. He causes everything. And in this one, they don't do that. It is the hitchhiker, but it's not the hitchhiker that causes the problem. They cause it themselves when they call the cops.
Yep.
Which goes to show you, if someone shoots themselves in the back of your car, you need to ditch the body, get back in your truck and drive out of the backwards hillbilly town you're in before you end up killed.
Or at the very least, drive through to the next town. Like, obviously, that being the situation, it being so like desolate, like if you have a distrust of cops, you really should have like I think naturally, especially because of horror movies, I have like a natural distrust of like small town podunk cops in the middle of bumfuck nowhere.
It's the same in this country. If you go into a country village, the police in that town are very much, they do things for the good of the town. They show it really well in lots of, I'm trying to think of a good example. Hot Fuzz is a really good example of a town cop, like a small town cop in the UK. So they'll let kids drink in the bar at night time at 14, 15-year-old, because that's less hassle than them being outside breaking something. They're there, they can watch them. And you get this level of like corruption and work for the greater good in small towns here.
Yeah.
And in small towns in the United States, some of the outlying towns in the bumfuck nowhere, I've got like 300 people in them. The sheriff is also the baker, the butcher.
Right. And knows everybody and grew up with everybody. And it's just different.
Yeah.
It's just different. Yeah.
We don't have places like that. I would love to go and do a tour of the southern states and go and find these weird places, stop in the gas station that gets one customer every 3 days. Like, that's on my bucket list of things to do.
You can't figure out like how they even stay open.
Yeah, I'd love to go to like a gas station, like the gas station in this. Like, just pull in, go in, get something to eat, get back in the truck, carry on driving. Like that. That's on my bucket list. I'll end up dead when I do it, but hey.
Yeah, you're always giving Mark shit about how he wouldn't survive in a horror situation because he's like sticking around, and you're like, you know what I would do voluntarily?
I think it's like I've always wanted to tour the States, but I'm really interested in the southern states, the Bible Belt, where they're all a bit. I love Heather. Heather lives on the Bible Belt. I'm not going to bash that area, but that area has an element of crazy that just appeals to me. I just want to go and see the crazy in that area.
It's the motivation for films like Texas Chainsaw. It's like, yeah, I don't like. I think this is an example of, because one of the things that we talk about a lot with horror movies in general is like when you put people in situations that you're just like, no way, like it just doesn't make any sense. This felt more plausible. They had a logical reason for driving where they were driving.
Yeah.
They stopped because they really were trying to be helpful. And this really crazy thing happened. They had no idea what to do. And it felt like the right thing to do would go to. I mean, all of these things make sense. We watching it know this is about to go really bad. But in a real life circumstance, all of those steps that ultimately lead to the rest of the film felt pretty logical from like, if like this were real life, right? Like,
yeah, it 100% works. And I think this and the original both have that going for them, because the original set in the time period that's set in, all of that makes sense as well. The one thing this is missing is it is missing a Franklin.
Yeah. Because in this one, the main, like, what's the little kid's name? Jebediah.
Yeah, Jebediah.
Jebediah, which is the little boy from The Ring.
Is it really?
It's the same little boy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it is, isn't it? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. If you just take out the crazy looking teeth, right?
Yeah.
You can see it. Yeah. No Franklin in this. No, what do you call it? Like, no equivalent of that either. Like, no,
And I think that was on purpose because lots of people hate on Franklin. I kind of like Franklin. Like Franklin, I saw a poll the other day where Franklin is like in the top 5 hated all-time horror characters.
What's the reason?
Because he's annoying.
Oh, just because he's annoying. Well, I mean, that's who he's supposed to be, right? It's a character.
Yeah. And I think an annoying character in this would have really helped, especially with the cop. You put that cop from 2003 with Franklin from the original and let those two characters interact, that's going to be some wild dialogue.
Yeah. And all the while building your discomfort because you're like, what the hell? Like, yeah, I can see. Yeah. No, I think I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah. Because I think like the other dynamics are relatively there, right? Because I'm trying to remember. It's been a long time since I've seen the original. Yeah, because otherwise you kind of get enough of a balance between the other characters, but I can't even imagine what that would have been like. That would have felt crazy.
Yeah, I just think it would be funny, just a character like Franklin, who quite blatantly many times in the original goes, we need to leave because this is fucked up. Like, put that character in front of the cop and get him to say that to the cop. We need to leave because this is fucked up.
Because I'm horrible with the names of characters, but the guy with the glasses.
Yes, the one who's got Jeffrey Dahmer glasses.
Yes. Well, what's the yeah. Like, I wonder if because he says those kinds of things, but he's also very like I don't know if cowardly is quite the word I want, but he's just very like quiet about his like, he has his little outburst, but when it comes to like being in front of like the sheriff and stuff, he's just very different.
He just shrivels.
Yes. And he's in something else that I liked him in that was a horror movie, but I cannot think of what it was. But I do like him. Like, I think he does good at the character that he was given. But yeah, he's one of those characters where you're like if that was my friend and I was in that situation, I just like, can you just shut up? Like, you're not helping. You're just being annoying. Like, just be quiet. But because he's the one that's like giving her a super hard time about wanting to help somebody. And it's like, yeah, you might technically be right, but also like she was just trying to do the right thing. Like, obviously she didn't know what the results were going to be because he wanted to leave. He was like, no, we don't pick up hitchhikers.
And in his defense, he's right. And to everyone watching, don't pick up hitchhikers.
Just don't. Nobody.
No,
I agree.
No, the only hitchhikers you could pick up here in the UK, I don't know if you get them in the States as well, but they do a charity event every year in the UK where they do hitchhikers start in one location and they earn money for charity based on how many miles away they get from that location before they get caught. And they have ID badges and stuff like that. Those hitchhikers pick up and take them as far as you can take. Yeah.
That's neat.
Yeah, I picked some up I think it was last year or the year before, and I picked them up from where I live in the south, and I drove 3/4 of the way up the country for work, and I took them all the way up. They got like 180 miles away with me.
Dang, that's awesome. Yeah, they don't have anything like that here. It wouldn't be safe to do anything like that here.
No, they do really cool. Like, I've seen a couple where they've managed to like blag their way onto flights and get free flights, and they've flown out of the country and they've got thousands of miles away. It's really cool.
That is cool. Huh. Yeah, but otherwise don't pick up hitchhikers because it's not safe. What do you rate this out of 10?
It's a 9.
Okay.
It's up there. It's not perfect, but it's not far off. It's a 9.
Yeah, I'm pretty close behind. I would give this like an 8.5.
Yeah, it's really good. Where would you score the original?
Probably a little lower. Probably.
Oh, really?
I mean, not much lower. Maybe like a 7.5.
Yeah. See, the original for me is a 10.
It's this is the problem I think that we talked about when we did quarantine. Is it's very, even though the original still worked very well for me, even seeing it after seeing this one first, it can be very difficult to not. It's just hard to judge it when you don't get the opportunity to see it first.
Yeah.
So I think that it still felt the same way it would have felt regardless. But as far as putting it in a ranking system, I think being older when I saw it, I think it's just a little bit harder. I think if I'd seen it first, we'd probably be having a very different conversation. But yeah, I would give it I would say like a 7.5.
Yeah, I'd say that both great movies, and if anyone's watching hasn't seen either, go watch both. Also watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 just for your sheer confusion that will follow when you watch that.
Yeah, this is a very inconsistent, intentionally inconsistent franchise.
I heard someone describe it the other day as a troubled franchise.
There we go. I like that. That works. That I think that encompasses. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it has its problems.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, cool. That's our thoughts on the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I don't have an image to put in, so I'll put it post-edit. But I recently redid the logo for our Remakes merch. So I'll put pictures around us somewhere of some options. If you're interested in getting some of that, the link for that will be in the description for this episode. I'm going to probably order myself a new one once I get it. I think I made it live already, so I just need to order myself one. But yeah, cool. Well, next month, we're going to say what we're talking about next month?
Yeah, if you want to.
Yeah, next month we're going to visit an interesting one that I actually did not know was a remake until we were trying to come up with updated lists since we'd covered so many already. And that's Mirrors with Kiefer Sutherland.
Yes.
It is a remake of a Korean?
Yes.
I'll have the facts in the next episode. But it's a Korean movie called Into the Mirror. And so we're going to be talking about that next month, which I think is going to be slightly different conversation than this one.
Yeah, I think we've got, I wouldn't say they're differing opinions, but we're going to have to talk some stuff out to make that work, I think.
It'll be like horror movie remake therapy.
Yes.
All right, cool. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Horror Movie Remakes. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Hope you have a good rest of your day and your weekend, and we will see you in the next one.
See you later.